I'm Una.
I'm Peter.
I'm Reba. We're in Oxford, and we're Blake Seven fans.
I'm Judith Proctor. I live in Dorset, and I'm a Blake Seven fanzine publisher.
My name's Alan Stevens. I come from the Forest of Dean, and I'm helping to bring Blake Seven back.
Captain Scarlet.
My first memories of watching Blake Seven were a bit hazy, really, because they were on a black and white portable television, because my mum liked Coronation Street, and the two programmes clashed.
The half of my class watched it. It was our sort of class soap opera. You know, those who didn't watch Coronation Street watched Blake Seven.
I was 14 when I first saw Blake Seven. It was on American television on PBS. I had been warned in advance that it was going to be on. I was a big Doctor Who fan, and they said, "Oh, you'll love this. It's great."
About 5 years ago, I had my appendix out, and while I was recovering from the operation, a friend lent me the entire series of Blake Seven on video. Instant addiction. It was wonderful.
It was all my brother's fault. He was a big Doctor Who fan, and he was 10 years older than I was, and I idolised him, so I started watching Blake Seven because he watched it.
Really, it was very different from anything I'd seen on science fiction television before. It was cynical, dark, didn't look like it was predisposed to happy endings, and I think maybe when you're 14, that's really appealing.
Blake Seven was devised by Terry Nation, a man who created the Daleks. He came up with this programme in 1975. His tagline was Robin Hood in space, and the BBC swallowed it, and they made the show in 77 for broadcast in 78.
It's about one extremely dedicated man, Blake, who believes in freedom for the masses, trying to persuade a crew of convicts to fight the good fight with him. And by and large, they're not terribly interested.
The programme changed from being Robin Hood in space to possibly Che Guevara and the Dirty Dozen.
It's people who believe they have a cause against an evil regime. As you think about it a bit more, the political aspects of it become a little less black and white. You start to think, well, are they really good guys, the things that they do? Are they really bad guys, the things that they don't do?
Are you sure that what we're going to do is justified?
It has to be. Don't you see, Callie, if we stop now, then all we have done is senseless killing and destruction, without purpose, without reason.
I suppose the main character would have to be Blake, and the programme's named after him. He's the man who's leading the rebellion against the Federation, the evil regime. At his right-hand side, but not necessarily supporting him, is the character of Avon, who is perhaps the devil's advocate of the piece, the voice of pragmatism.
He would shoot you in the back, no problem. And he was effectively an evil character who fought evil forces. But you sided with Avon because Avon was pretty cool.
I think, if I'm going to be honest, that probably when you're 12 and you're a girl and your hormones kick in and you're looking at Avon, you know, every week, then Avon, the sort of fascination with Avon is going to be part of the interest as well.
The combination sort of witty cynicism, dark saturnine good looks, and an interesting background ensured that he became a real hit with the female viewers.
You don't sound surprised.
Why should I be? It has a perverse kind of logic to it.
Servalan, the arch-villainess, played by Jackie Pearce, was wonderfully over the top and absolutely superb.
The lady who plays her, Jacqueline Pearce, said that they wanted to put her in boots and camouflage army gear, and she said, no, 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 you don't do that. I'm going to do it in a dress.
Any woman who can carry conviction whilst running across a quarry in evening dress and high heels deserves my eternal admiration.
British television is different to American television. American television is cinema-based, where British TV is theatre-based. So one thing that Blake Seven had over Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and shows like that is that it had time, that things moved in the show.
Star Trek was a very optimistic programme. At the end of every episode you get Kirk and Spock swapping a joke. Nobody, unless they were wearing a red shirt of course, ever got seriously hurt.
it may have been the first science fiction show that was really quite dystopian or cynical. I mean, there's things like the, you know, Rod Serling and The Twilight Zone, which was all a bit odd, and The Outer Limits. But that was, those were anthology series, where this was an ongoing show where you had characters constantly fighting against the odds.
But it's a doomed fight. You know, really, realistically, he can't win. And he doesn't. And the appeal of the series partly is the fact that the good guys don't win in the end.
Avon, this is stupid!
When did that ever stop us?
The people who wrote it, especially Chris Bouch, who's the script editor, you know, they're movie buffs and western buffs and cops and rubber buffs, and what you're seeing is interesting. You're seeing those archetypes being put into a science fiction context.
Possibly the greatest influence on the programme was Warner Brothers Pictures, those sort of gangster films they did in the 40s and 50s with Humphrey Bogart.
It's that kind of thing that causes the interesting relationship between Avon and Blake. He's Rick to Blake's Laszlo.
Paul Darrow is a big fan of Humphrey Bogart, and if you watch his performance, you can see where he's coming from.
Couldn't you bring yourself to trust me just this once?
I thought I might be able to help.
In that condition?
All right, I'll go back.
Can you manage? Alone?
Yes. Avon, for what it is worth, I have always trusted you, from the very beginning.
When you come back to Blake Seven after having watched it as a child, it's quite an interesting experience, because I think two things happen. The first is that you think it's better than I remember, quite often, because there are things about the way that the characters interact and talk to each other and the dialogue that you just don't appreciate when you're a child.
I love the relationship between Blake and Avon. This, can they trust one another? Why do they trust one another? I see Avon as being fascinated by Blake's idealism, while at the same time not wanting to risk his neck in Blake's cause.
I want to be free of him.
I never realized. You really do hate me, don't you?
I think you probably see what we'll call the sexual tensions more the second time round as well. You know, you just actually, the second time round, you kind of go, how did I miss this? It's staring you in the face.
You get the arch villainess and this distinctly grey hat person who's supposed to be on the good side, indulging us in the best on-screen kisses I've ever seen.
Imagination, our only limit.
The last episode of the series is called Blake, written by Chris Boucher. It was brilliantly written by Chris Boucher, and it dealt with the death of Blake Seven.
No sooner those closing gunshots rang out on the TV than fans sat down and started writing. It doesn't end here. Right. This is how they got out of it, or this is how they got out of it.
Fan fiction is fiction written by fans, which takes the characters that are in the programme, puts them in a variety of situations.
Fandoms don't tend to develop around things like, say, Coronation Street. You'll get lots of people who've watched Coronation Street, enjoy it immensely, but they don't go out and write fan fiction.
Basically, there's an ongoing tension between what we're shown by the people who make the show and what we really want to see.
It's a compulsion. You have to write. You know these characters, and there's only 52 episodes, and you've just thought, what would happen if... Ah! And you're away. And there's no special effects budget on fan fiction. You can have whatever you want in there. You can have them going down to an alien planet of your choice. You can have explosions where you want them. You can have expensive sets. The world's your oyster.
Here's the show. It's terrific. It has great characters, a great setting, great ideas, and they do a lot of good stuff with it, but they could do more, or it's not quite right. So you think, well, you know, maybe, you know, if we just think about this, we can fix it.
The first large thing I wrote was a novel. It started out as a short story. It was all about Avon and Servalan, because that fascinated me. What would happen if they were forced to work together as opposed to being on the opposite side? So I set up a situation where Servalan was essentially on the run and had to go with Avon, and then I could explore that sort of love-hate relationship between them with all the implications and ask questions like what would happen if they did fall in love, because there was a very strong attraction between them on screen, and what would happen if Servalan then got the choice of becoming president, but only by selling Avon down the drain.
I have never shared power with anyone.
The one I've got most feedback on is the one I wrote most recently. It's what we call a crossover story, where you take Blake 7 and another TV series and write something that brings the two together. In this case, it was a crossover with Morgan's Boy, which is something Gareth Thomas did back in '84. And I thought, what would happen if Avon went back in time, met this man who looks just like Blake, but isn't Blake, and what would happen? I like to explore motivations, emotions, and maybe it's because both characters meant a lot to me, but that was the best thing I ever wrote. There's, even now 20 years on, quite a lot of people publishing Blake 7. There's two fan clubs, Horizon and the Avon Club. They both publish fanzines. I publish fanzines. Now, I'm running a convention next February. And so in the space of 5 years, I've gone from not being in the fandom at all to organising the next convention.
Confirmed.
It goes back to the question of old-time folklore with King Arthur stories and Greek mythology and things like that, where people wanted to hear stories. And they wanted to hear stories about characters that were familiar. The easiest place to appropriate these kind of characters from now is no longer old-time mythology, but television or film, which can be regarded as the source of mythology now.
I've got a ready-made set of characters, and I find it very easy to write the dialogue that these characters produce. It's what's fun in Blake 7 watching it is the interchange of very fast lines and witty exchanges. And it's enormous fun to sit down and produce a page of this, of people just biting off each other and slagging each other off and generally being awful to each other. It's quite therapeutic, I suppose.
We were interested in putting out a version on the internet because traditionally when people publish fan fiction privately, it's an expensive sort of operation that involves lots of printing costs. We were the first one to put a significant amount of Blake 7 fiction on the World Wide Web.
People send us very nice letters, actually, especially ones in Australia, because they're so far away that most of the people who produce fan fiction are in America or England, and so they're having to pay very high postage costs. So they're very kind and grateful about being able to get the free fan fiction that's on the Aquitar files.
Confirmed.
The tapes I do came about after meeting Alistair Locke. He's an engineering genius. He has about £16,000 worth of equipment. He's been producing plays and music for many, many years. I started doing the audios because it was a chance to write. We had a ready-made cast, we had a ready-made audience, so, you know, why not do a Blake 7 story with Brian Croucher and Gareth Thomas and Paul Darrell and Jacqueline Pearson? I mean, it's a good idea. They were good, strong characters. The Logic of Empire is actually set after the final episode, Blake. Because the trouble with sequels is often you have a sequel and it ruins the original film. I hope that Logic of Empire has not ruined Blake. I think it's extended it.
Oh, Avon, Elise, make yourselves comfortable.
Oh, hello, Avon. I'm afraid Elise didn't introduce us properly early on.
Didn't she?
No, my name's Kelso. People call me Slim.
Hoodoo the blind.
Hey? What are you inferring?
I'm not inferring anything. I'm implying. You're the one who is inferring.
Could you say that again?
Yes.
Sit down, Kelso. Keep your brains warm.
The tapes are done on a very small budget. I mean, it's non-profit making. The actors aren't paid, bar expenses. The money comes from Horizon, which is a Blake 7 Appreciation Society. It's been going since 1980, and it has about 2,000 members. And they're very keen on hearing new Blake 7. So that's what I'm mainly producing it for.
Confirmed.
The characters appeal to me. The great dialogue appealed to me. The good plots, the good ideas behind the show.
Forget the special effects. We don't watch it for the special effects. We watch it for the characters and the scripts.
The best thing about Blake 7 is the intelligent people that I've met and the conversations that I've had with them.
Ooh, that's good. I wish I'd heard that. Yeah, I was going to say it was Avon. Being cute.
Eagle-Eyed Cherry's belting song is on the pops with the nation's #1 lad, our Zoe, on BBC One now.